in the boot camp I went to, they're like networking, got to do networking. And, I was like, what, who, where do I go? What do I do? And I agree with them too, especially in retrospect. I interviewed substantially with 4 companies, where there were multiple rounds, and 3 of those 4 came from some kind of networking action. So ultimately it was a really big deal.
Welcome to the Junior Jobs Podcast, where we give actionable job search advice to new software engineers that is relevant to today's job market. In today's developer interview, I'm talking with Jonathan Bryant, where we discuss how he was able to network to get his first job in tech, despite not knowing anyone to begin with. So no more complaining when you say, "Oh, but I don't know anyone." And our sponsor for today is Prentice. Prentice is an all-in-one job search platform where you can find junior tech roles, AI career coaching, job tracking tools, and more to help you stand out in your job search and get you hired up to 50% faster. You can sign up for free today or get 10% off their Plus and Pro plans if you enter the code ERIC10, that's Eric with a K, at checkout. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. I'm excited.
Yes, excited for the conversation because as we were talking before this episode, you mentioned you really wanted to focus on networking because you mentioned you didn't know anybody before you got into this. And I know a lot of developers I work with are uncomfortable about the idea of talking to strangers. So let's set the stage a little bit here. You're working as a behavior analyst. You've decided to
Mhm.
switch careers. You've joined a coding boot camp. So by the time you start actually looking for work, how well connected would you say you were in the software development community?
There's how well connected I felt and how well connected I actually was. And so I did not feel well connected. I think I had a friend that was kind of in the industry, but he was not an engineer, but he worked kind of, in tech. And, I tried to, get some ideas from him, but from the beginning, that's something that Flatiron, the boot camp I went to, pushed really hard was like, they're like networking, got to do networking. And, I was like, what, with who, where do I go? What do I do? And that's, and I agree with them too, especially in retrospect. I think I shared some of the numbers, for my applications and what actually worked. And, out of the 249 jobs I applied to, I interviewed substantially with 4 companies, where there were multiple rounds, and 3 of those 4 came from some kind of networking action. So ultimately it was a really big deal. But yeah, in the beginning, I did not feel well connected at all.
So, what was your first step in putting yourself out there and getting involved look like?
There's we got some feedback on how to do that from Flatiron, and they said just engage on LinkedIn, post, make blogs and stuff, and just trying to make yourself visible, and which is great, but for me that was it's like pulling teeth, where I was just like I wanted to spend hours on making sure the post was perfect or the blog was absolutely right, and it became a chore. And so I don't think that was a really effective strategy for me, and maybe for other people, like absolutely, like go with what feels good, but, but what started working well for me is where, I had the idea that I would hop on and just maybe take a deeper look at, maybe there was somebody I knew that I just hadn't talked to in a long time. So I jumped on LinkedIn and even Facebook and, and just some of those social networking platforms and just started, using some of the filters, especially with LinkedIn. It's a great filters. And I was like, hey, maybe let me look at everybody that I've gone to high school with, and see what are they doing today? Because there's a lot of people that I, just haven't talked to in a long time. And I was really surprised at the number of people that actually went into tech. And that, right away, I was like, now I've got a handful of people I can start reaching out to, which was great. And that's what was really great too, because then it wasn't like I'm forcing myself to try to, create a new relationship. There are already relationships there that I could start with, and that definitely started getting the ball rolling as far as networking is concerned.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not, it's, some people push back at the idea of networking as it seems like you're faking, a personality or you're trying to force a
mhm,
relationship. But really, you're doing networking well if it's really just about building relationships and not everyone can
100%.
be harvested for, some outcome, in this case, finding a job. Uh, but really, I found that the more that I just talk to other people, the more opportunities are just open to me. So to talk a little bit about, my story, because I really resonate with what you're saying here. is every opportunity that I've had in the last 3 years, whether it's speaking at conferences or this podcast or being guest speakers elsewhere, have all come from me just talking online. And I found the more I talk, the more I have to talk about, because the more questions people ask me, the new types of backgrounds of others I'm exposed to. So while it may feel awkward talking, reaching out to others initially, yeah, eventually it just becomes kind of this uh, self-fulfilling prophecy, or this well-oiled machine, uh, where the more output you create, the more inputs you get as well, and it's just like a natural
Yep.
extension of who you are.
100%, and it's just, I think about it as like lines in the water. Cause one thing you mentioned just now is that you don't know what relationship is going to lead to what, right? You just don't, and I was really surprised at some of the things that ended up working out, and I think it's just like, it's like fishing. The more lines you got in the water, the better chance of catching a fish, but that being said, I don't think the mindset going into any kind of relationship, whether you're just talking to somebody you haven't spoke to in a long time, or even just reaching out to somebody that went to the same boot camp you did, or maybe had some sort of similar background as you, like, it's, you can't approach it with that mindset of, I'm trying to get something, because people really feel that. But I think what people really responded to, and I think I learned this just through trying it, is just approaching everything with this genuine sense of curiosity, and that's whether it's in an interview, or whether it's, you're just talking to somebody on the street, and I think I've seen a lot of, some of the successful people that I know just do this naturally, when they're talking to somebody, is that genuinely being interested in what somebody else has done or is doing, people respond to that, and I think it's a great way to just start talking to somebody, especially if you are a little nervous about how to go into that, or how to start that conversation. It's just be genuinely curious about, what they've done, or what they're doing, or where they're working, in whatever context is related to what you're trying to do. And that just totally takes the whole transactional attitude off the table completely. And it makes that whole interaction a lot more authentic, and, I don't know, that's just my personal experience, but it's something that I really do believe in.
Yeah, and if you're just asking questions, that's especially important early on because you really don't know what you don't know, right? And there's
Yeah.
so many different
Yeah.
career paths and focuses that you can have in the technology space. So really, I mean, just asking that questions and getting that context from a trusted audience, people that you have that established relationship with, even if it has been a few years, is going to be incredible at kind of directing your own job search and targeting specific opportunities or specific industries, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
So walk me through. You mentioned 3 out of 4 of the substantial interviews that you had were through some sort of outreach. So kind of walk me through those 3 different ones. What did that outreach look like? Was it a LinkedIn connection with a former school friend? Was it a networking event, a meetup or
Yep.
what have you? What did those 3 look like?
Yeah, yeah, and just to define what I mean by by substantial or substantive interview, it's like, I know some of those applications, they'll immediately send you a, "Hey, take this quiz," and I'm like, or take this test or something, and I don't count any of that. It was something where I actually talked to somebody, maybe did some sort of project, went through some kind of a round or multiple rounds of interviews, um, and so with one of them, it was a company that I used in my previous career. And it was, I had used their software all the time, I understood the need, and so I just reached out. I was like, "Hey, I use your stuff forever. I'm one of your customers forever, but I'm doing this new thing. Would that be of any value to you guys?" And that led to a couple interviews, which was great. And I think, that one didn't work out because they were looking for a specific skill set that I didn't have the background in, but still, it still opened those doors, and it led to more connections, and more networking.
Yes,
Um,
something to point out there real quick before we jump into some of the other opportunities.
yeah.
You in that outreach, you're expressing your passion for that tool, and
Hmm.
then you're stating how you can help them.
Yeah.
As opposed to what I see a lot of juniors do is that outreach is more of, no research, just reach out because you have a job opening, and ask what I can get out of it. Hey, do you have an opening for me? Uh,
Hmm.
but you really kind of flipped it the other way is like, how can I serve you? How can I help you? I have some skills. How can I benefit you?
Yep.
Which I
It's
imagine as the recipient of a lot of these communications from junior
yeah.
developers, it's a lot. I'm a lot more prone to respond to you when you're offering to support me and help me Because I feel like so many people are just, asking for what's in it for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the difference between gimme, 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 and how can I help? Right.
Yeah, yeah,
It's huge. If you've been had, and I know this is slightly off topic, but one of my best like mental hacks going into any stressful situation is it used to be, please don't screw up. Please don't screw up. I got to get this right.
yeah.
And now it's like, whenever I start to feel that either the anxiety or the adrenaline, coming into whatever it is, whether it's an interview or a tough conversation, it's how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And just keep repeating that over and over myself. And like you said, it shifts the mindset. It changes the tone of the conversation. And then, to kind of bring it back to where we started, it's all about building relationships. That's where you really start to build a relationship, because relationships are two ways. They're not like a gimme, 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 right? It's a two-way street. So I think with that attitude and that mindset, it can make all the difference in the world.
That's wonderful. I totally agree, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was for one
Um,
of the opportunities was through that sort of
mhm.
outreach. What did the others look like?
Another one came actually through my former boss, where he, that's really what kind of led me to is just a series of random events where I volunteered for a project at work because we used to take a lot of pen and paper data and then by hand move it into Excel, and they switched to use tablets, and they used some software that was brand new, but the output was in a CSV format and no one knew how to work with it. And so they told us, oh, you need to learn how to write macros. And so I volunteered, not knowing what a macro was, started with VBA, which was not the best language for me to start with, but was a great learning experience. And then just learned to automate stuff in Excel. And then once I did, I was like, okay, there's a potential for huge impact here. And so I kept building more and more things for the company. And then when it came time where I was like, hey, this is really, I want to pivot to be able to still kind of help in this realm, but in the context of software engineering, they were just like, we're not even a little bit surprised. We totally support you. And they actually kept throwing me freelance work while I was making that transition, which was great. But several months down the road, I got an email from my boss who's saying, hey, we had a company reach out to us, about doing some of the work that you used to do for us, and I thought maybe that would be a good connection. So, here's this guy's email address, and, if you want to reach out to them directly. And so that's exactly what it is. They said, hey, my boss said you talked to him about this. I used to do something similar. I think that working in that space is a lot of value. And that led to a couple round of interviews as well.
So let me help understand that then. So for this second opportunity, your boss of a former employer reached out to you
Mhm.
after you had left the company?
Yes.
Okay, and he was just saying, "Hey, and he knew that you were trying to get into software engineering,
Yes.
correct? That's why
Yeah.
you had left that company to begin with? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so a principle there that I wanna call out, though, is just how vocal you were about where you wanted to take your career. Some
Yeah.
people that I've talked with are nervous about telling their current employer even that they are considering pivoting to another industry. They don't wanna rock the boat, maybe they're afraid of getting fired, and maybe that concern is valid for some work environments, toxic work environments, I would say. But
Sure.
generally, people work with people and people want to support people. So
Mhm.
because you were open and transparent and had a direction for you wanted to take your career and you had good relationships, you didn't burn bridges with people when opportunities
Yeah.
came up. They were reaching out and contacting you. Right. So then
Yep.
instead of having this, synchronous or single threaded job search, just you applying to jobs, how essentially a multi-threaded job search because you have all of these trusted partners who know about you and are surfacing opportunities to you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I tried to there's this, I think part of it was being authentic because I was passionate about what I did. That didn't go away. As a behavior analyst, I designed and managed treatment programs for individuals with developmental disabilities, and, or that struggled in the classroom for behavior related reasons. And so, having a front row seat to that, I'm like, there's not a lot of tech in that space. There's some, but I think it's way beyond the curve. And so that I think that when I realized that, if I love the impact that I was making, but I couldn't scale it,
Mhm,
but once I discovered, how tech can be applied, I remember one day walking by and seeing one of the other employees using a program I built, and it just hit me. I think that was probably my turning point. It hit me. I was like, I'll never know who this child is. I probably will never meet them, but something I did is helping them. And I was like,
mhm,
this is impact at scale. And I think that's probably the moment where I kind of flipped. And I was always open about that. And I think I was very fortunate in the sense that they were really supportive of it.
mhm.
And so like I said, they still kept throwing me work. So I was still trying to do the freelance stuff on the side, while trying to really make that full time pivot. But yeah, I know I think I'm very fortunate. But now that you think about it, now that you've mentioned that too, I think that was that was part about building relationships too, right? That was
Yeah,
still
yeah.
networking. That was still, figuring out how I can help and building that two-way street in that relationship.
There's a part of how you sell that experience there that I think is an important principle. You mentioned how you're working in this non-tech industry and you notice some gaps. So then you went to pursue some education so that you can potentially help solve some of those gaps.
Hmm.
So a lot of people I talk to focus on, or they use the phrase that I am pivoting to a different career. I am transitioning careers. And that almost gives off this impression of you are taking all of your experience that you've built up over the years, you're throwing it away, and you're doing something completely different. When really, this is a natural progression of your existing professional career, and it's the next logical step. So when
Yep.
you are, whether you're posting on LinkedIn or in these job interviews, I would embrace that part of your story of how you identified these gaps. Maybe you built some portfolio projects around those gaps, and
Hmm.
now you're trying to launch your career in a similar or related industry because you want to help solve those gaps at a a broader level or at a bigger scale.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. That's exactly because sometimes I would say it out loud, or I was like, "Yeah, I was a former behavior analyst, but now I'm a software engineer." And if you just say it like that, you're just like, "Oh, okay, it's two completely different worlds." I mean, you do hear the word analyst and behavior analyst, but
Hmm.
it really had nothing to do with technology. It was very much behavior related. It was my background was in psychology, and so you know when when you're really focused on on the why, I guess, like what about what you're doing and how is that related? It gives a lot more context. And I think it really kind of forms the foundation for passion. If you're genuinely passionate about it, that really gives you a solid foundation. So yeah, it's that's something I had to rehearse a little bit, I think, in order to otherwise I could spend 20 minutes describing how that story went, so it's so that I did have to rehearse a little bit so that I could kind of really give somebody that background quickly. But yeah, it's I would never recommend discounting anybody's former experience,
Yeah, you're
because
gonna.
it's
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
no, no, please go ahead.
I was gonna say that sometimes developers will ask, well, what should I build for my portfolio projects? Well, it's whatever you're passionate about is going to be the best answer there. Because one, you're going to be essentially your own product owner. You are your own customer, so that the features you build out, the problem you're solving, that domain you're going to understand more than anybody else. And when it comes time to actually demo it and show it to a potential employer, if you're applying in a similar related industry, they would also hopefully be able to see the value of what you're building. So to-do apps, weather tracker apps are great for learning to code, but as far as your portfolio you're trying to put forth out there, definitely
Yeah.
focus on a specific segment of the industry that you're passionate about.
Yeah, no, and it's funny you say that because for my final project, at Flatiron, for the boot camp, I built a program in React Native that replaced something that I did as a consultant when I worked for school districts. Because I kept thinking, I was like, God, I'm reteaching the same thing over and over again. It's not that complicated, but having me here is really expensive for the school district. And I was like, this could just be an app in someone's pocket. It's not that complicated, and so I did that. That's actually a project I want to come back to. But when for the company I work with now, that's something that I brought in. I demoed it. I was part of the interview process, and I explained. I was like, "This is why I built it. This is why it needs to exist. Like these are the pain points in the classroom." And it almost backfired in the sense that they offered me a different job as a business analyst.
Oh,
Whose role would have been more like figuring out what needs to be built and why. But I don't backfire is the wrong word to use there because I think at that point, it was really clear to everybody that I'm passionate about working specifically in this space, and that I'm going to take the time and energy to specifically build tools for this space, you know?
so this is the third opportunity. This is a nice transition, by the way. Thanks for pulling us back to that list of three networking um, opportunities. So, how did you actually touch base with this company and get in the door with this third opportunity?
Yeah. So this was a kind of when you talk about, lines in the water, this was, I think a couple of things came together. Um, Ultimately it was somebody that I met at Flatiron. That ended up getting a job in that, at the company. And then we had a relationship, kept the relationship alive. But I think that the foundation of that relationship came from, she was a speech and language pathologist. So she worked with a lot of the same kids that I did, so she understood a lot of the same things. And so I think she knew we had this we had the same motivation, and the same passion. And so when that company started looking for new devs, she came to me right away, and she really went to bat for me, which I really appreciated. It sounds like she made a lot of noise to make sure, because it's a fairly large company. And so there were a lot of applications, and I'm really grateful for that. But again, it really came down to, just talking about what I did in the past, really understanding what she did, and connecting with that, keeping that relationship alive. And that just was really just reaching out once in a while, checking in, how you doing? Like simple
Mhm.
stuff. It doesn't take a whole lot, but
It can be so intimidating trying to get into tech because essentially, if we look at the cohort around you, if you're going through a boot camp, they are all in some way a competitor, right? There are only a few openings that are
sure.
open, and you're all trying to apply to the same roles. And it can be easy to treat that as kind of like a cutthroat environment. You're trying to look good relative to them. And that's true
Mm,
to a degree. But networking with other developers who have no idea what they're doing, right? They're also just starting out. It sometimes can feel like a uh, useless way to spend your time, right? Who do they know? What do they know? Right? They know
man,
just as much as me,
true.
and we know nothing.
Yeah.
But you never know the different paths that they're going to take. And this one, the fact that you stayed in touch, I think is a testament to the importance of not building bridges, not burning bridges, and staying in touch with people that even don't necessarily at that time have anything that they can give you.
Yeah. Yeah. If you would have asked me in the beginning that it's going to be somebody in my cohort that's going to help me get a job, that would have been real surprising, because I had mentioned earlier, when I found some people on LinkedIn, there's somebody I hadn't spoken to from high school in 20 years, and he was just like, "Oh, it's great to talk to you. It's great to catch up. I'll make you a deal. If you can get some background in Java, I will get you an interview." And so like
Dude.
that was more, and that was great. I was like, okay, but if I really want to deviate from everything that I've studied so far, and I kind of had that, that struggle a little bit, but that's more of where I thought that the connections would come from, and they did, but yeah, I think you're 100% right. Is that you really just don't know if you're building authentic relationships, and it doesn't have to be that you're the ultimate extrovert. You're just
Mhm.
building authentic relationships with people that are, interested in what you do, and vice versa. Then you never know how that's going to pay off for you one day. You
Well,
know?
hopefully, Jonathan, after this conversation, nobody can use the excuse, but I don't know anybody. Yeah, use that to not network. Because, I mean, you've done it. I've had to do it. Tons of developers have done it, and they've been able to find success in it.
Mhm.
So thank you for helping kind of bring some real life examples to what that might look like. So I just want to thank you for joining, and thank you all that are listening, and we will catch you all next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Junior Jobs Podcast. We hope you found today's interview helpful as you navigate your own job search in tech. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like and subscribe, as that helps us reach more developers in need. And don't forget to check the show notes for details on today's sponsor and other job search services that we provide. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.